I'm 32 years old and my name is Quintina. For years, I've been a successful financial consultant, quietly supporting my family behind the scenes. Everything changed last Thanksgiving when my mother looked me straight in the eyes and said those words I'll never forget. "You're just a burden, always have been." My brother Jackson laughed, adding, "At least I make this family proud." I simply put down my fork, stood up, and walked out without a word. Weeks later, when Dad called frantically asking why the mortgage was unpaid, I just said, "Ask your pride and joy." Before I tell you how I went from family ATM to reclaiming my worth, let me know where you're watching from and click subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, where the houses all looked similar, but the families inside were worlds apart. My parents, Daniel and Margaret Walker, had always made their expectations clear. Excellence was the minimum requirement. But somehow that standard applied differently to my brother Jackson and me. From the time he was 8, Jackson was the golden child. He could throw a football with surprising accuracy, and my father decided then and there that sports would be his ticket to glory. Every weekend was dedicated to his games, every dinner conversation centered on his latest touchdown or home run. Mum would beam with pride, describing his plays to anyone who would listen, while Dad talked about scholarships and professional prospects before Jackson had even finished elementary school. Meanwhile, I sat quietly with my books and perfect report cards. Math came naturally to me, numbers made sense in a way people often didn't. I remember bringing home a perfect score on a state math competition in 4th grade, placing first in all of Washington. Mum glanced at the certificate and said, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to Jackson's participation trophy from his youth football league. "Did you hear what the coach said about Jackson's throwing arm? He's got a real gift," Dad would say, completely overlooking my achievements. I learned early that academic success was expected, not celebrated. By high school, I was taking advanced placement classes and tutoring classmates for extra money that I saved in a small lockbox under my bed. Jackson was struggling to maintain the minimum GPA required for sports eligibility, but my parents hired tutors and made excuses. "He's just not a book person," Mum would say. "His talents are on the field." The pattern continued into our college years. I earned a full academic scholarship to Northwestern, majoring in finance, with a minor in economics. During my sophomore year, my father called about their past due electricity bill. "We're just in a tight spot, Tina," he said, using my childhood nickname that he only deployed when asking for favors. Jackson's training camp was more expensive than we budgeted for, and we had to get him the right equipment. That was the first time I dipped into my savings to help them $600 that I'd earned tutoring. I told myself it was a one-time thing. By the time I graduated summa cum laude, I had helped my parents with emergencies, totaling over $5,000. At my graduation ceremony, they stayed only briefly before driving 3 hours to watch Jackson's spring football game, despite his position on the bench for a Division II school. "We promised him we'd be there," Mum explained, hugging me quickly. "You understand, right? You're always so independent." Independent wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. I had learned that relying on my parents for emotional support was as futile as expecting them to celebrate my achievements. After college, I accepted a position at a financial consulting firm in Chicago. The starting salary was impressive, especially for someone just out of school. I rented a modest apartment, lived frugally, and focused on building my career. My analytical skills and work ethic quickly gained notice, and I was given increasingly important projects. Meanwhile, Jackson graduated with barely passing grades and no job prospects. His dreams of professional sports had faded when his college career proved mediocre at best. Instead of finding stable employment, he convinced our parents to invest in his first business venture, a sports training facility that closed within 8 months. "It's not his fault," Dad insisted when I questioned the wisdom of their investment. "The location wasn't right. His next idea is much better." The next idea, a sports memorabilia shop, failed even faster. And somehow, each failure became another reason for my parents to support him more emotionally and financially. By this point, I was sending them money monthly, ostensibly for their mortgage or utilities. But I suspected much of it went to funding Jackson's ventures or bailing him out of debts. Every time I visited home, there would be some new story about how Jackson was just about to turn things around with his latest scheme. I built my reputation at work as someone who could handle complex financial situations and difficult clients with calm precision. My boss often commented that I had a unique ability to see patterns others missed and create order from financial chaos. The irony that I couldn't apply this skill to my own family situation wasn't lost on me. "You've got a gift for this," my mentor at the firm told me after I saved a major client relationship. "But you need to know your worth and not let people take advantage of it." Second, if only she knew how those words applied to my personal life. Each month, the transfers to my parents' account continued becoming a fixed expense in my budget, like rent or utilities. The amounts grew as my salary did with my parents, somehow always aware of my promotions before I even told them. I began to notice a pattern in their calls. They rarely asked about my life or work unless it related to my income. The initial gratitude for my help had been replaced by expectation, as if my financial support was an obligation rather than generosity. Still, I continued telling myself that family helps family and that someday they would see and appreciate my contributions. Jackson cycled through more failed businesses, brief stints at jobs he deemed beneath him, and periods of living in our parents' basement. Each time the narrative remained the same. He was just temporarily down on his luck, but his big break was coming any day now. And each time I would get another call about some urgent financial need. The resentment grew quietly within me, like interest accumulating on a debt that would eventually come due. By 29, I had risen to senior financial consultant at my firm, commanding a salary that put me in the top income bracket for my age group. My expertise in wealth management and investment strategies had earned me a reputation that brought in high net worth clients. I now had my own office with a view of downtown Chicago, a symbol of how far I'd come. During one particularly successful quarter, I received a substantial bonus. That same week, I got a call from Dad about a medical issue. He needed surgery for a herniated disc, and their insurance wouldn't cover the full cost. "It's $20,000, Tina," he said, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. The pain is getting worse, and your mother is worried sick." Despite the voice in my head questioning why they hadn't saved for medical emergencies, I agreed to help. I told myself this was different. This was health, not another of Jackson's failed ventures. The surgery was successful, and I flew home to help during Dad's recovery. While organising their paperwork, I discovered credit card statements, showing charges for expensive golf clubs and a luxury vacation to Scottsdale, purchases made just weeks before the urgent call about the surgery. When I cautiously brought this up, Mum became defensive. "Your father deserves some enjoyment in life. He works hard," she said, conveniently ignoring that I was the one who had just paid for a $20,000 surgery. "What about Jackson? Is he helping with anything while Dad recovers?" I asked. Mum's expression hardened. "He's going through a tough time right now. His latest business partner cheated him, and he's staying in the guest room until he gets back on his feet." Okay, another business, another failure, another excuse. The pattern was so predictable, it would have been funny if it weren't so painful. That visit established a new normal. My parents began calling regularly with financial emergencies. Dad's truck needed repairs, the roof was leaking, property taxes had increased. Each time the justification was compelling enough to make me feel guilty for hesitating, yet vague enough that I couldn't verify the exact need. I began tracking these expenses in a spreadsheet, telling myself it was just to keep my own finances organised. But deep down, I knew I was documenting a pattern of exploitation that I wasn't ready to confront. My own life was on hold in many ways. Colleagues bought homes while I rented, afraid to commit to a mortgage, when so much of my income was diverted to my family. Friends took vacations while I worked overtime, telling myself that extra money might be needed for the next family crisis. Dating was challenging. How could I explain to someone that a significant portion of my salary went to supporting parents who seemed healthy and a brother who refused to support himself? Then I met Marcus at a charity fundraiser hosted by my firm. He was an architect with kind eyes and a thoughtful way of listening that made me feel truly heard for the first time in years. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives. After 6 months of dating, the subject of family finances came up. I had cancelled our weekend plans because my parents called about yet another emergency, this time, a plumbing disaster that threatened to flood their basement. "It happens a lot, doesn't it?" Marcus observed gently as I hung up from arranging the wire transfer. "What does? These emergencies that only you can solve." His words weren't accusatory, but they hit a nerve. I found myself defending my family, explaining their struggles and my obligation to help. But even as the words left my mouth, they sounded hollow. "Quintina, Marcus said, taking my hand. From what you've told me, you've sent them over $70,000 in the 2 years since your father's surgery. That's not emergency support that's becoming their primary income. Put so bluntly, the truth was undeniable, yet I still wasn't ready to act on it. The tension between my success and my family's expectations continued to grow. Each promotion or bonus became not a personal achievement to celebrate, but a new resource for them to tap. Conversations with my parents inevitably turned to their financial needs or Jackson's latest venture. My accomplishments remained unacknowledged unless they translated directly to financial assistance. As Thanksgiving approached, I was in the final stages of securing a major client that would lead to another promotion. The timing meant I would need to work through part of the holiday week, but I planned to fly to Seattle the day before Thanksgiving and return to Chicago the day after. When I called to tell my mother about my travel plans, her response was immediate and sharp. "You need to be here for the whole week. Your brother is bringing his new girlfriend, and we want to have a proper family gathering." "Mum, I can't. This client is too important. I could lose the account if I'm not available." "There's always some excuse with you, isn't there? Some reason why work comes before family." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. The only time I was essential to family was when they needed my checkbook. But I swallowed my resentment and agreed to fly in Wednesday morning instead of Wednesday evening, sacrificing crucial preparation time for the sake of peace. Little did I know that this Thanksgiving would mark the end of my role as my family's personal bank and the beginning of my long overdue independence. The flight to Seattle was turbulent, much like my emotions as I prepared to see my family. I had just finished securing the Anderson account, a 7-figure portfolio that would cement my position for the promotion to principal consultant. Yet instead of celebration, I felt only dread about the upcoming holiday. I rented a car at the airport and drove the familiar route to my childhood home in the suburbs. The neighborhood had aged well, with mature trees lining streets of well-maintained houses. My parents' home, a 4-bedroom colonial they had bought when Jackson and I were in elementary school, looked freshly painted with new landscaping. As I parked in the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar luxury SUV, too new and expensive for my parents' supposed financial situation. A cold knot formed in my stomach. How many emergencies had I funded while they upgraded their lifestyle? Mum opened the door before I could knock, her practiced smile not reaching her eyes. At 59, she still maintained the polished appearance that had been her armor. Throughout my childhood, perfectly colored hair, carefully applied, makeup-coordinated outfit. "Finally," she said by way of greeting. "Your father's been asking when you'd arrive." No hug, no "how was your flight?" No congratulations on the major client I'd mentioned during our last call. Just impatience at my timing. Dad emerged from his study giving me a brief, awkward hug. Unlike Mum, age was showing on him, his hair thinner, his posture slightly stooped. But the Rolex on his wrist was definitely new. "The guest room is ready for you," Mum said, already turning away. "Dinner's at 7. Jackson and Amber should be here by then." I carried my own suitcase upstairs, passing the wall of family photos. Jackson's sports pictures dominated football, basketball, baseball through the years. My few photos were mostly group shots, my academic achievements invisible compared to his athletic ones. The guest room had once been mine, but no trace of my childhood remained. It had been redecorated with expensive bedding and art pieces I didn't recognize. The furniture looked new as well, a far cry from the budget constraints my parents claimed when asking for help with their property taxes 3 months earlier. I unpacked quickly and took a moment to check my work emails before heading downstairs. The house smelled wonderful. Mum had always been an excellent cook, especially for holidays. In the living room, I noticed more new furniture, including a large smart TV and sound system that definitely hadn't been there during my visit last Christmas. "Did you redecorate recently?" I asked casually as Mum arranged appetizers on a serving tray. "Just a few updates," she said dismissively. The old furniture was falling apart. Jackson helped us pick everything out. I bit my tongue against asking how they had paid for these updates when I had just covered their homeowner's insurance last month. The sound of the front door opening announced Jackson's arrival. At 34, my brother still possessed the athletic build of his youth, though softened now with comfortable living. Beside him stood a slender blonde woman with an expensive handbag and carefully maintained appearance. "Tina," Jackson boomed with the false enthusiasm he always used in family settings. "Meet Amber. Babe, this is my little sister I told you about." Amber offered a manicured hand and a practiced smile. "Jackson says you work in banking or something." "Financial consulting," I corrected gently. I manage investment portfolios and wealth strategies for high net worth individuals. So you're good with money, she said with a laugh. You'll have to give Jackson some tips. Podcast. Mum quickly intervened. Jackson doesn't need tips. He's about to launch his most promising business yet. Tell her about it, honey. And so began the familiar routine Jackson holding court about his newest venture, an app that would supposedly revolutionize sports betting. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking encouraging questions and nodding at all the right moments. I noticed Amber watching me, perhaps sensing my detachment from the family performance. Dinner was served with an elaborate spread that would have impressed any food magazine. Turkey ham, multiple side dishes, 3 different desserts, a feast that seemed excessive for 5 people and inconsistent with their claimed financial hardships. Throughout the meal, conversation revolved around Jackson, his business ideas, his golf game, his plans to take Amber to Aspen for Christmas. Mum and Dad beamed with each story, occasionally turning to me with perfunctory questions about that job in Chicago, as if my career was a temporary distraction rather than a successful professional path. During a brief lull in Jackson's monologue, I attempted to share my news. I just secured a major client that's going to lead to a promotion, I said. I'll be the youngest principal consultant in my firm's history. Dad nodded vaguely. Mum said, "That's nice, dear," before immediately turning to Jackson. "Tell Quintina about the investors you met last week." And just like that, my achievement was dismissed, my presence once again reduced to an audience member for the Jackson show. The familiar ache of invisibility settled in my chest, but this time it was accompanied by something new, a simmering anger that had been building for years. I thought about Marcus's words about the spreadsheet of emergencies I'd funded about the new furniture and electronics throughout the house. As dessert was served, I made what would prove to be a fateful decision. I asked a simple question. "Mum, Dad? I was wondering if we could talk about the loan for Dad's medical bills. I know it's been a while, but I was hoping we could set up a repayment plan." The room went silent. Amber looked confused. Jackson's expression flickered between surprise and amusement. Dad suddenly became very interested in his pie. Mum's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. When she spoke, her voice was ice. "Loan. We never discussed any loan. That's what family does, they help each other. Besides, we've done everything for you your entire life." "I know family helps family," I said carefully, "and I've been happy to help, but in the past 3 years I've sent over $120,000 for various emergencies. That's not just helping, that's supporting the household." Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Jackson smirked. Amber's eyes widened. Well, Jackson said. "Someone's been keeping tabs." Mum's face flushed with anger. "How dare you bring this up at Thanksgiving dinner, after everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, years of hurt behind the words. That's when she said it, the words that would change everything. "You've always been so difficult, so demanding of attention. Even now, trying to ruin a perfect family dinner with your pettiness. You're just a burden, always have been." The room froze. Even Jackson looked shocked at the nakedness of the statement, but he recovered quickly, laughing uncomfortably as he added, "At least I make this family proud." Something broke inside me then, not in a way that hurt, but in a way that finally set me free. With strange clarity, I saw the dysfunctional dynamic that had shaped my entire life. I saw my value to them not as a daughter or sister, but as a reliable source of income. I saw the years of emotional manipulation that had kept me tethered to their expectations while receiving nothing in return. With deliberate calm, I put down my fork. I stood up, and without a single word, I walked out of the dining room, up the stairs, and began packing my suitcase. Mum followed, her anger shifting to panic when she realized I was actually leaving. "You're overreacting," she said. "Don't be so sensitive." I continued packing in silence. "Quintina, stop this nonsense. You can't leave on Thanksgiving. What will Amber think?" I zipped my suitcase, picked it up, and finally looked at my mother. "Thank you for dinner. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight and flying back to Chicago in the morning." I walked past her down the stairs and out the front door. No one tried to stop me. No one apologized. No one asked me to stay. In my rental car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. Grief for the family I'd never truly had, rage at years of exploitation, and beneath it all, a surprising sense of liberation. As I drove away from the house where I had never truly belonged, I made a decision that would send shockwaves through the family system. The transfers would stop. All of them, immediately. Little did I know that this Thanksgiving exit was just the beginning of a storm that would force every family member to face some uncomfortable truths, my parents most of all. The hotel room felt sterile but safe, a neutral space where I could process what had just happened. I sat on the edge of the bed still in my Thanksgiving outfit, trying to make sense of my mother's words. "You're just a burden, always have been." Had she always felt that way through my childhood achievements, my academic success, my financial support of their lifestyle? Was I really nothing but a burden to them, even as I paid their mortgage? My phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, text messages from Dad. "Your mother is upset. You need to apologize." From Jackson. "Way to ruin Thanksgiving, drama queen." 3 missed calls from Mom, no voicemails. I turned off my phone and ran a hot shower, standing under the spray until the water began to cool. That night I slept fitfully, cycling through anger, hurt, and moments of panic. Had I overreacted? Was family harmony worth the continued exploitation? By morning, a strange calm had settled over me. I changed my flight and was back in Chicago by noon the next day. Marcus met me at my apartment, concern written across his face. I hadn't told him much over the phone, just that there had been an incident and I'd left early. "What happened?" he asked, pulling me into a hug that felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. I told him everything: the new furniture, the dismissal of my promotion, the confrontation over repayment, and finally my mother's devastating words and my silent exit. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, he took my hands in his. "Quintina, I'm so sorry they treated you that way. No one deserves that, especially not from family. But I have to say I'm proud of you for walking out. That took incredible strength." His words were a balm to my raw emotions. For perhaps the first time in my life, someone was proud of me for standing up for myself rather than for what I could provide. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me never wants to speak to them again. Another part feels guilty for leaving, like I'm abandoning them. "Gay, you're not abandoning them," Marcus said firmly. "You're refusing to be abandoned by them emotionally and in every way that matters." Over the next few days, I tried to lose myself in work, but the situation with my family lingered like a shadow. My parents had resumed calling and texting, their messages evolving from angry to concerned to manipulative as they realized I wasn't responding. A week after Thanksgiving, I was checking my online banking when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There had been an attempted withdrawal from my primary checking account, an automatic payment to my parents' mortgage company that had been scheduled months earlier. The amount was substantial, and had it gone through, it would have caused several of my own bills to bounce. Fortunately, I had just transferred funds for my own apartment's rent, so the account held insufficient funds for their withdrawal. The system had flagged it as a failed transaction. Within minutes, my phone rang Dad. I let it go to voicemail, then Mum, then Dad again. The voicemail notifications piled up, each message more urgent than the last. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I made a decision. Opening my laptop, I began systematically cancelling every automatic payment to my family's accounts. The mortgage, the utilities, the credit card minimums, all of it. Next, I called my bank and put a freeze on any external withdrawal requests. Then I changed my email password and security questions, realizing with a chill that many of the previous answers had been information my parents would know. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like dismantling a bomb while simultaneously jumping out of an airplane. For so long, my financial support had been the primary value I held for my family. What would happen when that was gone? I made an appointment with a therapist the following week, recognizing that I needed professional guidance to navigate this seismic shift in my family dynamics. Dr. Rivera was a compassionate woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma and boundary setting. "What you're describing is financial exploitation within a family system," she explained during our second session. "It's particularly insidious because it's wrapped in cultural expectations about family obligation." "But shouldn't family help each other?" I asked, the guilt still lingering. "Help is reciprocal and respectful," she said. "What you're describing is one-way support with no acknowledgement, gratitude, or respect for your own needs and boundaries. That's not help, that's exploitation." We worked together on developing a clear plan for establishing boundaries, financial ones first, but emotional ones too. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to trusted friends and colleagues. I set up a new email address for personal communications. I created distance that would allow me to heal. The hardest part was mourning the family I thought I had, or perhaps more accurately, the family I had always hoped for but never actually experienced. There were days when the grief felt overwhelming, when I questioned my decision and considered giving in, resuming the transfers, accepting my role as the family ATM for the sake of maintaining connection. During those moments, I would open the spreadsheet where I'd documented years of financial emergencies and remind myself of the pattern. I'd reread the text messages dismissing my accomplishments. I'd recall my mother's words, "You're just a burden, always have been." Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my sense of self-worth, separate from what I could provide for others. I focused on my career, pouring energy into projects that showcased my talents. I deepened my relationship with Marcus, learning what it felt like to be valued for who I was, rather than what I could give. I developed friendships with people who showed genuine interest in my life and celebrated my successes. 2 weeks passed without contact. Then 3. I began to wonder if they would simply accept the new reality and find another way to support their lifestyle. Then came the call that confirmed everything I had suspected about my role in the family. It was a Tuesday evening, nearly 4 weeks after Thanksgiving. A number I didn't recognize appeared on my phone screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was my father, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Quintina, thank God. Why haven't you been answering our calls? Why did you change your number?" I remained silent, letting him fill the space. "Look, there's been some kind of mistake with the mortgage payment. The bank says it didn't go through and now they're threatening foreclosure. I need you to transfer the money right away. No, how are you?" No acknowledgement of what had happened at Thanksgiving, no apology for my mother's words or Jackson's cruelty. Just the expectation that I would solve the financial problem immediately. "It's not a mistake," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I cancelled all the automatic payments." Silence, then explosive anger. "You what? How could you do that without telling us? We depend on those payments." "I know you do. That's the problem." "What is that supposed to mean? We're your parents, for God's sake." "Yes, you are, but that doesn't obligate me to pay your mortgage indefinitely while being treated like a burden to the family." His tone shifted from anger to manipulation, a pattern I now recognized clearly. "Your mother didn't mean what she said. She was just upset. You know how she gets." Whether she meant it or not, it revealed how you both truly see me, and I won't fund a household where I'm not respected or valued. This is about respect. Fine, I apologize for what happened at Thanksgiving. We all said things we didn't mean. Now will you please transfer the mortgage payment? It's due tomorrow and we don't have the funds. "No," I said simply. "I won't be making any more payments." The sputtering disbelief on the other end would have been comical if it weren't so sad. "What do you mean, no? What are we supposed to do?" And that's when I delivered the line that would become a turning point in our family dynamic. "Ask your pride and joy." "Jackson, don't be ridiculous. He doesn't have that kind of money." Then perhaps it's time he found a way to contribute instead of living off the support that was meant for you and Mom. "This is outrageous. After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Dad? Please be specific." He had no answer, just more blustering about family obligation and my selfishness. "I have to go," I said finally. "I wish you luck in resolving your financial situation." I hung up, hands shaking but resolve intact. Within minutes, the calls from unknown numbers began. Mom, likely other relatives they had enlisted in their campaign. I didn't answer. The text messages ranged from guilt-tripping, "How can you do this to your own parents?" to threats, "You'll regret abandoning your family when we're gone," to bizarre attempts at gaslighting, "We never asked you for money, you offered." Jackson's contribution was particularly telling. "Way to prove you were always the selfish one. Hope your precious money keeps you warm at night." I documented everything, forwarding the messages to a dedicated email folder labeled Family Financial Abuse, a term Dr. Rivera had introduced that accurately described the dynamics at play. Over the following week, the family recruitment campaign expanded. Aunt Susan called my office. A family friend sent concerned messages on social media. Even my mother's sister, who lived in Florida and whom I rarely saw, emailed to say I was breaking my parents' hearts. None of them seemed aware of the true financial situation, that I had been supporting my parents' lifestyle and Jackson's failures for years. In their eyes, I was simply a cold-hearted daughter refusing to help aging parents in need. Rather than trying to correct each person individually, I made a decision. I would address this once clearly with the primary players involved. I sent an email to my parents and Jackson proposing a video call to discuss the situation. "I'm willing to have one conversation about this," I wrote. After that, my decision stands regardless of the outcome.
Kasi
They agreed immediately, perhaps thinking they could wear me down in a live conversation. We scheduled the call for Sunday afternoon. I prepared meticulously, creating a simple presentation with 3 slides. The first showed a timeline of my financial support. The second detailed the total amounts categorized by recipient and purpose. The third outlined my terms for any future relationship. When Sunday arrived, I logged in to find all 3 of them waiting, Mom and Dad at their kitchen table, Jackson joining separately from what looked like his apartment. Their expressions ranged from concerned to hostile. Thank you for agreeing to this call. I began professionally, as if this were a client meeting rather than a family intervention. I want to clarify my position regarding financial support and our relationship moving forward. Before they could interrupt, I shared my screen and began the presentation. Over the past 5 years, I have provided the following support. I said, displaying the timeline. $237,412 in direct transfers and payments. Their faces registered shock at seeing the total quantified. This includes $78,000 for mortgage payments, $42,000 for utilities and property taxes, $20,000 for Dad's medical expenses, and $97,000 for various emergencies and loans to Jackson's business ventures. We never asked for, Mum began. Please let me finish, I said firmly. During this same period, I have delayed purchasing my own home, limited my retirement contributions, and cancelled multiple vacations to accommodate these expenses. I have done this without complaint, without recognition, and until recently, without question. I advanced to the next slide, showing the breakdown of where the money had gone. As you can see, these aren't occasional emergencies. This is systematic support of a lifestyle and financial irresponsibility that has been enabled by my income. Dad's face had gone pale. Mum looked away from the screen. Jackson's expression was unreadable. On Thanksgiving, Mum, you called me a burden. You said I've always been a burden. Jackson, you laughed and said, at least you make the family proud. After years of financial support and personal sacrifice that was illuminating, I advanced to the final slide. Moving forward, these are my terms. 1. All financial support has permanently ended. 2. I will consider rebuilding a relationship only after a 6-month period of no contact, during which you will respect my boundaries completely. 3. Any future relationship will be based on mutual respect and recognition of my worth beyond my financial contributions. The explosion was immediate and entirely predictable. Mum cried about ingratitude. Dad blustered about family obligation. Jackson accused me of being heartless. I listened without interruption until they had exhausted their initial reactions. Then I said simply, those are my terms. They are non-negotiable. And if we don't agree, Dad demanded, then we have no relationship. I replied, surprised at how steady my voice remained. I value myself enough now to walk away from people who don't respect me, even if they're family. This is blackmail, Jackson snapped. No, it's a boundary. Blackmail would be if I were demanding something from you. I'm not. I'm simply stating what I need to maintain a relationship. But what about the mortgage? Mum asked, her voice smaller now. What about our bills? You have options, I said. You can sell the house and downsize. Dad can come out of early retirement and work. Jackson can contribute from his income instead of funding business ventures. My salary barely covers my own expenses, Jackson protested. Then perhaps it's time to adjust your expenses, I suggested, as I've had to do for years to support this family. The call continued for another 30 minutes, cycling through the same arguments. I remained calm, neither yielding nor engaging in their emotional manipulation. When it became clear we were simply repeating ourselves, I wrapped up. I've said what I needed to say. The choice now is yours. I ended the call, closing my laptop with finality. Then I did something I hadn't done since Thanksgiving. I cried. Not from sadness or regret, but from relief. The truth was finally out in the open, and I was finally free from a burden I had carried for too long. Whatever happened next would be up to them, but for the first time in my adult life, my financial and emotional future was entirely my own. The 3 months following that video call were both challenging and transformative. True to form, my family tested my boundaries immediately. The day after our conversation, Mum sent a lengthy email detailing their immediate financial needs and suggesting a compromise, where I would continue support during a transition period. I didn't respond. Dad called my office, leaving messages with increasingly urgent pleas about impending financial disaster. I instructed my assistant to take his contact information but provide no details about my availability. Jackson took a different approach, oscillating between angry accusations and awkward attempts at reconciliation that inevitably included mentions of money he needed for a guaranteed success business opportunity. Through it all, I maintained the boundary I had established: complete financial separation and no contact for 6 months. It wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was being too harsh, if I should offer some transitional support. Dr. Rivera helped me recognize these thoughts as the result of years of conditioning to put my family's needs above my own. Your parents are adults with options, she reminded me. They made choices that led to this financial situation, and they are capable of making different choices now. Those words became a mantra during difficult moments. Through mutual connections and social media, I learnt bits of information about how my family was adapting. The changes came in stages, each one confirming that my decision had been necessary, not just for me, but ultimately for them as well. First came the house. By the second month of no financial support, my parents listed their home for sale. They found a buyer quickly. The real estate market in their area was strong and moved to a 2-bedroom condo that my mother described to family friends as cozy, but privately complained about as cramped. Next came employment. Dad, who had taken early retirement years earlier when I first began supporting them financially, found a part-time position as a consultant in his former industry. The salary wasn't close to what he had earned before, but it provided steady income to supplement their reduced expenses. The most surprising change came from Jackson. Faced with parents who could no longer bail him out or fund his ventures, he was forced to find stable employment. Through a connection from his college football days, he secured a sales position at a sporting goods company. It wasn't glamorous, and it required consistent effort, something he had avoided for years, but it provided a regular paycheck. Meanwhile, my own life flourished in unexpected ways. Without the constant drain on my finances and emotional energy, I discovered a sense of freedom I had never known. I finally began the process of buying my own home, a modern 2-bedroom condo in a neighborhood I loved. I increased my retirement contributions and started an investment portfolio separate from my work. My relationship with Marcus deepened. He had stood by me through the entire ordeal, offering support without judgment and space when I needed it. 6 months into our relationship, we began discussing a future together, cautiously at first, and then with growing excitement. Professionally, I continued to excel, my focus sharper, without family crises consuming my mental bandwidth. The promotion I had mentioned at that fateful Thanksgiving dinner came through, along with a substantial raise that now went toward my own security and happiness rather than supporting my family's lifestyle. New friendships blossomed as I opened myself to deeper connections, no longer afraid that people only valued me for what I could provide. I joined a book club, took weekend trips with friends, and even started volunteering at a financial literacy program for young adults, using my skills to help others in a healthy, boundaried way. 4 months after our video call, I received an unexpected email from my mother. The subject line simply read, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for several minutes before opening it, preparing myself for another manipulation tactic. Instead, I found what appeared to be a genuine, if awkward, attempt at accountability. "Quintina," she wrote, "these past months have been difficult but clarifying. Your father and I have had to face some uncomfortable truths about how we've treated you and the expectations we've placed on you. I want to apologize for calling you a burden. You never were. In fact, you were our strength, and we took advantage of that in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. I don't expect this to fix things between us, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the hurt I've caused." The email ended without any requests for money or assistance, the first communication in years that didn't include a financial need. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I brought the email to my next session with Dr. Rivera, uncertain how to process what seemed like a significant shift. "This may be a positive sign," she said cautiously, "but remember, one email doesn't erase years of behavior. True change takes time and consistent effort. You're right to be cautious." 2 weeks later, I received a similar email from my father, less emotional than my mother's, but equally free of financial requests. He acknowledged his role in creating an unhealthy dynamic and expressed regret for taking my support for granted. "I should have been the one supporting you," he wrote. "Instead, I allowed myself to become dependent on my child. I'm working now to stand on my own feet again, and while it's been humbling, it's also been necessary. Jackson remained silent, but through social media updates, I saw he had been promoted at his job and seemed to be settling into a more stable lifestyle. As the 6-month mark of no contact approached, I felt a growing sense of peace with my decision. The distance had allowed me to heal, to establish a life based on my own needs and desires rather than others' expectations. It had also somewhat ironically forced my family to develop healthier patterns and greater independence. When the 6 months ended, I sent a brief email to my parents, suggesting a video call to check in. We arranged a time for the following weekend, and I approached it with cautious optimism. The faces that greeted me on screen were noticeably different from those at our last call. Both looked older, but somehow lighter, as if the burden of financial deception had aged them more than financial independence. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," Mum began. "We've missed you. I've missed aspects of our relationship too," I said carefully. "The healthy ones." The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd had before. There were moments of awkwardness and old patterns trying to reassert themselves, but also genuine attempts to connect without manipulation or expectation. Dad spoke about his part-time job with unexpected pride. "It's good to be contributing again," he admitted. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Mum shared stories about their new neighbourhood and the community activities she'd joined. Neither mentioned money, not their needs, nor my success. It was refreshing but strange, like speaking a new language with familiar people. As for Jackson, they reported he remained resistant to the new family dynamic, but was adapting in his own way. "He's angry that we can't help him like we used to," Dad explained. "But honestly, I think it's been good for him. He's sticking with his job longer than anything else he's tried." Before ending the call, I clarified my boundaries moving forward. "I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but it needs to be based on emotional connection, not financial support. I won't be resuming payments or loans of any kind." They nodded, expressions somber but accepting. "We understand," Mum said, "and while we can't change the past, we're trying to do better now." It was a start, imperfect but genuine. The road to a healthy family relationship would be long and likely bumpy, but for the first time it seemed possible. That Thanksgiving, 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything, I hosted dinner in my new home. Marcus was there, of course, along with friends who had become chosen family during the year of transformation. My parents attended, bringing a side dish rather than expectations. Jackson declined the invitation, not yet ready to accept the new reality, but sent a brief text wishing me a happy holiday. The contrast to the previous year's Thanksgiving couldn't have been more stark. Instead of tension and unspoken resentments, there was authentic conversation. Instead of being ignored, my accomplishments were acknowledged. Instead of feeling drained, I felt energized by the connections around my table. As we ate dessert, my mother raised her glass in an unexpected toast. "To Quintina," she said, her voice steady, "for having the courage to break patterns that none of the rest of us could see or admit. You've changed all of us for the better." The words weren't perfect, and they couldn't erase years of hurt, but they were a significant step toward healing. Later that evening, after everyone had left and Marcus and I were cleaning up, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Proud of you," he said simply. "That couldn't have been easy, but look at what you've built, a life on your terms." I leaned back against him, taking in the moment. My home, my choices, my boundaries, my worth recognized, reassured not for what I could give, but for who I was. The journey from family ATM to self-respect had been painful, but as I stood in my kitchen surrounded by the life I had created, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth every difficult step. 1 full year after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, I stood at the window of my Chicago condo, watching snow gently dust the city in white. So much had changed in 12 months, both around me and within me. My path to healing hadn't been linear. There were steps forward and back, moments of doubt and certainty, days when I questioned everything, and days when I felt completely at peace with my decisions. The relationship with my parents had slowly evolved into something I wouldn't have recognized 2 years earlier. Our interactions were no longer centered around financial needs or expectations. Instead, we had begun building connections based on genuine interest and mutual respect. Mum had joined a community choir and often called to tell me about upcoming performances rather than emerging crises. Dad had expanded his part-time consulting work into a small but sustainable business that seemed to give him a sense of purpose he'd lacked during his financially dependent years. They still lived in the condo they had downsized to, but now spoke of it with genuine appreciation rather than resentment. "Less to clean, less to worry about," Mum had said during a recent call. I don't know why we held on to that big house for so long. The most significant change, however, was in how they treated me. My accomplishments were now acknowledged with pride, rather than immediately translated into dollar signs. When I mentioned work challenges, they offered emotional support instead of seeing it as a threat to their financial security. When I visited, they asked about my life, my goals, my happiness questions that had been absent throughout my adult years. Jackson's journey had been more complicated. Initially, he had maintained his resentment, blaming me for disrupting the family system that had benefited him for so long. But reality has a way of asserting itself, and without our parents' financial safety net, he was forced to develop skills and responsibility he had avoided for decades. 6 months after I cut financial ties, he had received a promotion at the sporting goods company. 3 months after that, he moved in with Amber, sharing expenses for the first time in his adult life. When his car broke down, instead of calling our parents, who now couldn't help even if they wanted to, he found solutions within his own resources. Most surprisingly, 2 weeks before this anniversary of change, Jackson had called me directly, our first one-on-one conversation since the confrontation. "I've been thinking about last Thanksgiving," he said without preamble. "About what I said. About how I've treated you all these years." I had remained silent, giving him space to continue. "I was a jerk," he admitted. "Worse than a jerk. I took advantage of you just like Mom and Dad did, maybe even more. And when you finally stood up for yourself, I attacked you for it because it threatened my free ride." The admission had stunned me. Jackson had never taken responsibility like this before. "I'm not asking for money," he added quickly. "That's not why I'm calling. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. What you did cutting us off, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, even though I hated you for it at the time. Thank you for saying that." I had responded, emotion tightening my throat. "It means a lot to hear." "I'm still figuring things out," he said, "but I'm doing it on my own for once. It feels different. Better, actually." That conversation hadn't magically repaired our relationship, but it had opened a door I thought would remain forever closed. My personal life had flourished in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days after last Thanksgiving. Marcus and I had grown closer through the challenges, his unwavering support showing me what healthy love actually looked like. 3 months ago, he had proposed during a weekend trip to Michigan, and I had said yes without hesitation. The engagement ring on my finger caught the light as I turned from the window. It was beautiful, but intentionally modest. We had decided together to prioritize our future security over flashy symbols. This shared value around money and what it represented was just one of many ways our relationship differed from the financial dysfunction of my family. Professionally, I had continued to advance, now managing my own team of consultants and developing a specialty in helping first-generation wealth builders create sustainable financial strategies. My experiences had given me unique insight into the emotional aspects of money management, particularly within family systems. I had also begun speaking at financial wellness seminars, sharing my expertise, while carefully keeping my personal story private. These presentations had led to opportunities I would never have pursued while focused on supporting my family, writing articles for financial publications, appearing on industry podcasts, even exploring the possibility of authoring a book. The emergency fund I had once maintained for family crises had been repurposed as my own safety net and future investment fund. Instead of dreading unexpected phone calls about others' financial emergencies, I was building resources for my own goals and dreams. My friendship circle had expanded and deepened. Without the constant drain on my emotional and financial resources, I had energy to invest in meaningful connections. Weekend brunches, book club meetings, volunteer projects, all these had become regular parts of my life, rather than activities I squeezed in between family crises. This Thanksgiving would be different from both the disastrous one a year ago and the healing, but still tentative one I had hosted in my home. This year, Marcus and I had decided to create our own tradition, a Friendsgiving celebration with the chosen family we had built around us. My parents had been invited and had accepted without pressure or expectation. Jackson and Amber would not attend, but he had suggested meeting for coffee when I visited Seattle for Christmas, a small step toward a new kind of sibling relationship. As I stood reflecting on this year of transformation, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, on my way home with the groceries, ready to start cooking our first Thanksgiving together. I smiled, typing back, "More than ready, this is going to be the best one yet." And it was true. Not because everything was perfect or all wounds were healed, but because I had finally learned the most important financial lesson of all: my worth was never determined by what I could provide to others. The journey had been painful but necessary, from family ATM to self-respect, from enabler to boundary setter, from invisible supporter to visible valued human being. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, always giving financially without receiving emotional support in return, feeling valued only for your wallet rather than your worth, please know that change is possible. It's not easy and it requires tremendous courage, but the freedom on the other side is worth every difficult conversation and painful realization. Have you ever had to establish financial boundaries with loved ones? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and growth. Like this video if you believe in the power of healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never measured by your wallet.